for one. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dr. Fox, do you have any changes to the agenda?
I do not.
Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion by Dr. Painter and a second by Mrs. Sullivan Smoot to approve the agenda as presented.
Dr. Painter.
Process now. We'll just wait for that information and make changes as we need to. At the local level, our Board of Supervisors, who are appropriating authority, they're currently also working on their local budget, so they're doing a very similar process to what we're doing. We did have, I think, a very successful meeting with them on Tuesday night at Stanley Elementary School. It was nice to meet with them and talk with them. We appreciate them participating in that meeting with us. They have some meetings coming up to work on their budget, and we will get with them and present our budget to them on March the 29th. And then they do have a tax hearing, public hearing, and the adoption of both of those budgets on April the 19th. They adopt their final budget on May the 3rd, and then we'll follow up with a meeting to adopt our final budget just after that. So here's your calendar of remaining meetings. The next one of which is next week. We have our regular February board meeting, and at the beginning of that, we'll have a pre-budget hearing for the public. So that's the second opportunity for the public to make comment. And we'll come back to a couple of these dates at the end of the presentation, but just there to remind you of the process. We have a couple work sessions. So tonight will again just be preliminary for you to think about what information you might need us to provide you, and what questions you might need answered as we move forward. And I just want to begin tonight with, as we've been doing in many of our meetings across the division, what is our why? Why are we here? What is our work? What's our purpose? And our mission for Page County is to provide an engaging, encouraging, and empowering learning environment that promotes student success. And our why is the student. You guys saw this picture on Tuesday night. Okay. And we're going to continue to use pictures like these just to remind us of our focus and why we're doing what we are doing. Money always brings out, different sides of things, but if we keep ourselves focused on the kids, I don't think we'll have any problem moving forward. How do we ensure student success as we move through? So this is where we're going to lay out some of the priorities for you as we've taken input from our school level, division level, and some of the conversations that we've had as a team. But our first, if we want students to be successful, we have to attract, train, and retain qualified staff. Compensation is our number one priority, and we have to stay competitive in the region. We've got to stay competitive in this area with wages for some of our staff, classified staff, our custodians, our cafeteria workers, people like that. And that includes revamping our classified salary scale, which you'll see tonight. Would you like me to wait?
I think he took the water with him.
Keep going. Oh.
Go ahead.
We also want to, and when we think about compensation, we also want to think about our benefits package that we provide to staff, and make sure that's affordable and competitive. We want to find creative ways to fill gaps in response to the teacher shortages that we're seeing. And that might consist of things like assisting with the costs of courses to help teachers get licensed. We also want to provide high-quality job-embedded professional learning for staff so that once we get them and train them, they're going to be skilled and knowledgeable in the variety of areas that they need to be. We want to build programs to support teachers and other staff. For instance, we have a mentor program. We want to just continue to grow that. And we have we want to look at programs like Grow Your Own Leaders or Grow Your Own Teachers, where we can help, again, facilitate people becoming either assistant principals and principals or teachers in our division. And we shared this on Tuesday night when we were with the Board of Supervisors. Compensation is one very important piece of getting people here and keeping them here, but it's also about creating a climate and a culture where people want to work here and stay here. So that's a critical piece to what we're doing in the background, is taking that growth and working on the parts that are really good that we already have here, because there's so many good things already in Page County, and building and growing on those and keeping that culture that will help sustain people once they come and work for us. In terms of regional salary comparison, I think this is important because, again, if we want to bring people here, we have to be competitive. And right now we're still sitting at number 5 in our region, and this is just looking at beginning teacher salaries for this year. You can see the difference there for a teacher who might choose to go to Rockingham versus Page County, the difference there. And that matters because a young teacher at that age, they're going to look at the starting salary And they might make a decision solely based on that. So we've got to be more competitive in that. We also have to meet the ongoing academic, social, and emotional needs of our students. And right now, everyone knows that we're overcoming the challenges that the pandemic has thrown our way, whether that's interruptions, transitions to and from in-person learning and remote learning, and different gaps in learning that we have to continue to address. We also want to look at expanding programs to afford students with more opportunities, whether that's workforce preparation through the Page County Technical Center, expanding course offerings there, or it could be at the school level where we offer different internships so that students can explore careers. And then again, looking at those career exploration opportunities for kids all the way up from kindergarten through 12th grade. We also want to expand our partnerships with the Lord Fairfax Community College, our local businesses and organizations. They're vital in helping us meet the needs of our students. And we want to provide support and opportunities to those students that are most at risk, our students with disabilities, and expansion opportunities for our gifted learners. And I think this is a really telling graphic for where we sit right now in terms of our cost per pupil. And again, this is from 2019-20. We haven't gotten the updated one yet for this school year, but we will soon. And I think what is of note here is Page County is doing a lot for students with a little bit of money. You know, we have one of the highest graduation rates in the region, and yet we have the lowest cost per pupil. So what that tells us is you have really, really good people doing great things for kids, but there's got to be more here in terms of what we can provide to our students. And so I think this graphic is very telling. You're well below the state average. And it's not always about the dollars, but it's where you invest those dollars, and we can invest more dollars in people. We also need to meet the ongoing academic, social, and emotional needs of our students. We all know that we've seen a dramatic increase in the emotional, social, and behavioral needs of our kids this year. Schools are managing mental health situations which require support from community resources in many cases. And these issues are related to things such as the pandemic itself, poverty, trauma, or the impacts of drug abuse. So just a lot of different things going on that our kids need extra support with. And to do that, our staff are providing ongoing support and care like they've never had to do before. But they are also experiencing unprecedented levels of stress themselves. So we have to do things to support them as well. If they're not in a good place, they can't support our kids. So some of the positions we're going to talk about later and adding to the budget are school counselors, social workers, behavior specialists, alternative education teachers, instructional aides, and teacher positions. And then we always need to keep looking at how we can improve and upgrade our facilities and efficiently manage our operations as a division. And if you look at many of our facilities at the age of them, they're pretty old. And the point we made on Tuesday night, and I'll make it again here tonight, is that even though they're old, that doesn't diminish the pride that we have in those buildings and our facilities. We have some magnificent buildings, and there's a lot of history in those buildings, and that matters. We wanted to just take a moment to thank our custodial and our maintenance staff because their efforts are critical, and right now they're keeping those buildings and facilities running. But with age, when you get buildings that are that old and facilities that have that much wear and tear, you're just going to see that constant, never-ending state of repair and management that has to occur. And at some point, you reach a breaking point where you can no longer fix it, you've got to replace it. We definitely need some additional improvements and upgrades, things like aesthetics, painting, replacing ceiling tiles. We're doing some of that work. In terms of functionality, in some of your older buildings, you may only have classrooms that have 2 electrical outlets at all. And with some of the modern technology and other pieces of equipment that we're using, you can't sustain that in some of these classrooms. So there's a need for electrical upgrades. HVAC work is critical to help with air quality and circulation, and we're fortunate that we have some grant fundings that we're going to use to do that. But we still have to upkeep those things over time. The care and feeding of those machines and things doesn't go away. Health and safety, we need to replace some doors and windows around the division that have just gotten old, and they just need to be replaced. And then certainly we can modernize and update and refresh some of our spaces. For example, some of our restrooms need to be renovated. So that's work that's not cheap. You talk about, renovating a restroom, you're talking about thousands of dollars. And then some other areas of need that we just need to constantly be focusing on as well. We do have an aging fleet of buses and vehicles, so we need to be constantly replacing those. Always going to be experiencing the rising costs of operating expenses and services such as gas for our buses. And we just need, again, because of the age of some of our buildings, we need to consider the reality of future planning for our facilities and really begin to look at how we might be able to fund if we do have to replace some things or renovate. All right, so every budget is built on enrollment. So I want to just walk you through quickly the enrollment number that we're choosing to build our budget on. This is a graphic that you've seen before. This is the 10-year trend for Page County schools. And you'll see, unfortunately, that trend is downward in terms of the enrollment of students. And this is your pre-K to 12, so it does include the little ones in here. And when we talk about enrollment, we're talking about when I give you enrollment numbers, and this chart, it should look familiar. We used this at the beginning of the year when we started talking about different things. We're talking about a snapshot in time when we use the word enrollment. So that day, how many students are actually sitting in seats in our schools? And that can fluctuate. And what you saw from July to August to now, we've seen a decrease in the number of students that are enrolled with us. So right now, our total enrollment is 3128, and that includes your pre-K. Our ADM enrollment, which I'll talk to you about in just a second, is 3030. And our budgeted number that we used this year was 3123. So that's why you have the negative 93. And again, we were fortunate. We were held harmless in the budget. The General Assembly and the governor kept that money in there. So we were funded at the original 3123 this year. So in terms of how do we determine our state funding that comes to us, they use what's called our average daily membership. So that's our ADM projection. And you can see in FY21, you budgeted for 3214, and the actual ADM was 3122. So you came in under there as well. This past year, we again budgeted for 3123. We're under that as well, but held harmless. This coming year, we're playing it a little bit conservative, and we're using the state number that they actually are providing to us. And so we're going to use 2986 as our budgeted ADM amount. So average daily membership is a little bit different than what we call our average daily admissions or attendance, or what I call enrollment in the previous slide. And it's determined by dividing the total aggregate daily membership by the number of days of school in session. And you start from the first day of school, and they use the end of March, so March 31st. And that's how you get average daily membership. And it's more than just about how many students are enrolled on that particular day on March 31st. It's actually a function of how many students are enrolled and how long they've been enrolled with us. And again, state funding is largely based on that, and it doesn't include our pre-K or our comprehensive services that funded students that we might have. So that number is important to remember, because that's what all of the numbers that you're going to see tonight in terms of state funding are based on 2986. All right, we've talked about this a number of times as a group, but just to reiterate for our public, these are factors that routinely impact our budget, and they will this year. The primary thing is this is a needs-based budget. We are required by law to have a needs-based budget, so our student needs come first when we look at priorities. We do get allocations from various funding sources, and that's where our money comes, and we are required by law to have a zero-based budget at the end of the year. We can't go over, and we can't have anything left. So those allocations are coming from federal, state, and local authorities. We do have the enrollment fluctuations like we just talked about. There's always likely going to be a health insurance increase, and this year for our projected budget that we're sharing with you tonight, we've projected a 10% increase. We're hoping it'll come in under that, so it won't be as expensive, but that's certainly something we have to project out. Always, again, have those rising costs of operating expenses and services like gasoline and oil. And then the biggest thing you're going to see tonight are those compensation adjustments and the needs that we have there. So we have a salary scale adjustments that we're going to make tonight to that classified salary scale. And then we're going to look at a salary increase that would be applicable to everyone across the division. The other little piece we have to consider is that additional minimum wage requirement that goes into effect in January of 2023. That's going to automatically be built into this budget as well. We always have SOQ requirements, which are standards of quality. Those are our staffing requirements. We definitely still have things related to COVID-19 that we may have to deal with. And then we have capital improvement projects. And there are other mandates outside of the standards of quality that we may have to deal with in this budget cycle as well. So in terms of our priorities, these are the things that we're going to show you some numbers for in terms of how we built out this budget and what we're going to be requesting moving forward. So there is a compensation increase built in here, and we're asking for all of our employees for a step plus a 7% salary increase. The state biennial budget, the way the government proposed it, is it's a 2-year budget, and in order to get full funding, you have to have at least a 2.5% budget increase, and then it's prorated. But if you do 5% each year, you get the full funding amount. So we have to do at least a 5%. And I want to go back to those original slides. If we're going to be competitive, we've got to exceed 5%. Because your neighboring communities are going to be doing at least 5%. We just stay where we are. We don't gain any ground. So we've got to go higher than 5%. So we're proposing a 7% increase tonight. You're also going to see information about classified scale adjustments. So that's our folks like our instructional aides, some of our secretaries, custodians, those staff that we've made some adjustments at your request to their salary scales, and we'll get into details on that in just a moment. And again, that does include that next minimum wage adjustment. Anything I forgot there? Good. In terms of academic and instructional student needs, you're going to see we've paced out the addition of an electricity teacher at the technical center. That's to meet demand. We had students on a wait list this year. We're requesting and put in an alternative education teacher, and that's to support temporary learning for students who might just need a different environment for a little while. A classroom teacher, the location of that's to be determined, and instructional aid, same thing. Location is to be determined. In terms of the social, emotional, and behavioral needs of our students, we're looking to add a social worker for the division, a behavior specialist position who would work with teachers to help give them strategies on how to manage and work with students and their families, an additional school counselor position just to help with some of that career planning and also the mental health needs of our students. In terms of organizational efficiency, we have put in a position, what we're going to call a data systems specialist, and that's to help with power school management. And we discussed this in our January meeting where that person is becoming more and more critical. Right now, it's a split position for us. Mr. Samples does it in addition to his technology work. It really needs to be a position for one full-time person. They're responsible for all of the state reporting, plus all of our data, and our student information runs through Power School. And we need to be able to extract that information. And there's a lot of functionality to Power School that we can be using. So we're recommending that position just to help us be more efficient. And then in terms of facilities and operations, if we add that other electricity class, we're going to need to upgrade the space, provide the materials and supplies and the equipment for that class. So that's an additional need and expense there. So here's an example of what your compensation increase will cost us. So again, we're talking about a 7% salary increase for all employees, plus a step for anyone where they might be applicable if they're on a step. So for example, if you look at that diagram to the side, it might mean that someone at step 4 gets a 7% and they'd move from step 4 to step 5. The total cost of that for all of our employees is $2.171 million. So it's a lot, but I think it's an investment well worth it in our folks to do the work that we're asking them to do. So that's a 7% increase. If you look at your classified scale adjustment, a lot of work is going into these, and there's a lot of scales that have to be readjusted. The primary action that's happening, the first step that they're doing, is doing what's called unbanding the steps. So if you look at that diagram there, you'll see steps 1 through 4, there's no movement as you move up a step. They're all making the same amount of money. So unbanding means you take those out and each year you put an incremental increase in there. So that's step one of that process. The second step was that they adjusted the teacher assistant scale and the custodial scale to bring the minimum wage there up to $12. So that gets us in compliance with January 2023, knowing that in a couple of years, there are additional minimum wage requirement upgrades, ultimately getting to $15 an hour. And then they've also capped all of the classified scales at 30 steps. Some of them went under 30, some went over. Now they'll all be consistent and capped at 30. And this will make it similar to some of our supervisory and administrative scales that we have where there's a cap. Doing all of this, unbanding it, making things consistent, bringing things up to the minimum wage should bring us into better alignment with surrounding divisions in terms of the scale. So we are less likely to lose people when they go to another division to make money. The cost of that is $477,030.
That also took into consideration making those step increments consistent within the scale. I know when we looked at some scales last year, you all saw inconsistencies in between each step. We went in and adjusted so that each step is the same percentage increment throughout the entire scale. Now, not every scale has the same percentage increment, but each one in the scale now is equal and consistent. Whereas when, I'm sure you all remember last year, we saw a lot of those were not that way. So that was a big process within each scale.
No, don't apologize. I want you to jump in. So when you look at it in total for compensation, just for that one piece of ensuring student success, those two pieces together, it's $2,648,280. So again, it looks like a huge number, and it is in reality in our budget. But again, I think it's money well spent. So I'm hoping we can work through things to get to that 7% next step in those scale adjustments.
And that number there also includes the salary and the benefits. So when we calculate this, it's salary and benefits for all positions, as well as health insurance costs. So that is the benefits as well. Just wanted to make that part clear.
I can do that. In terms of those staffing positions that we talked about in order to support student needs, what you see here, same thing. You're seeing the cost for that full-time employee, so FTE is full-time employee, and the cost you see there is their salary and their benefit. So in total, if we want to add those positions, so again, social worker, behavior specialist, counselor, another teacher at the tech center, alternative ed teacher, a classroom teacher, an instructional aide, and the data system specialist position, you're looking at $599,475.
And again, that number includes the benefits.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Like on the social worker, so one person hired, their salary would be 90,000.
That's including their
Includes all the
benefits.
benefits.
And so also when we calculate these are all on different scales, obviously.
Okay.
But we also don't start at step 0. Because if we hire someone who has more experience and then we have only budgeted for someone at step 0, we're already now behind in our budget process. So for example, when we budget for a teacher, we use the master scale step 5. So then that way we have allowed ourselves the availability to maybe hire someone with some more experience and not be below our budget on it.
So were you assuming on their, like, health insurance?
We assume that they are going to take health insurance.
You know, the family plan or the individual?
Well, we do it's a $7,632 for the year. Yes, so we take the average. We do not use the like employee child plan that we have a higher fringe on. We do the average of those. Yes.
Any other questions there? Everybody clear on those positions? You don't need any additional information about any of those positions?
I don't know when's a good time to ask this question, but from the technical center, So really, in what you presented so far is adding one teacher for one class of electricity. So that's not really, are we talking about building larger?
I have that later on as it's a piece that we need to consider if we can find extra funds.
Okay.
And then decide what we want that expansion to be.
But this is what you would do if you
For
could
now.
do it.
Yes, yeah.
If you could.
And understanding too, with the technical center, letters just went out to over 50 plus businesses, industries and whatever. And there could be some good donations coming in that could be put towards that cost.
Yeah, you guys
Is that
might
right?
decide you want me to allocate $100,000 to an expansion of another room, and then we decide later on whether it's HVAC or plumbing or something like that.
If anything, I would like to think, by communicating with these outside businesses and things, that will bring money in that would take the burden off of the school system. Whatever's legal to do. And go from there.
And we decided to start with electricity because we know the
Sure.
demand is there. We know that there's kids to fill those seats.
Makes sense.
And we can, I think relatively inexpensively, we can create that extra classroom space. So this is just giving you a little bit more in addition to not only the cost for the teacher of that class, we also need to make sure that there's a space that can be outfitted for its use. I mentioned this earlier. So the materials, the supplies, and the equipment. We've currently budgeted about 5,000, but we're anticipating that likely will be closer to 15 to 20,000. They're getting us some updated numbers, things like lumber changes and things like that. So if need be, we can either increase our amount in our budget or we look for local funding and reallocate some funding to make that happen. And then at the request, we talked about this last fall, was including the school board salary increase, because that hasn't happened in a while for the board members. So we do have that rated at the 7% of the base salary for each board member, and their FICA is included in that, and the total cost of that comes to $1,628. So your base salary is $3,600. So again, 7% plus FICA over that. And you'll see these two numbers, the 5,000 and the 1,600 added together later on in a chart. Just remember that that's what we mean by other costs when they get added together.
So I got a question on that. When we vote for a budget to approve a budget, this is just me talking. I would like to see that in a separate vote versus being inside the whole thing.
So do you remember last year, Mr. Painter, how we kind of had to have a consensus? I had to say, are we all in agreement on this part? Are we all in agreement on this part?
Okay.
So you all will have to tell me, yes, I'm in agreement on this, and then that's how it would be added. We'll go through the priority list and not in agreement. We don't have to vote on it. You all don't have to vote on it, but I do have to have an agreement of whether or not we're going to add it into the budget.
Okay, as long as we have that discussion, because I'm never going to be in favor of raising our salary. I'll just be quite honest with you, until other needs are taken care of. But that's just me.
I mean, because it's not like it makes a carpet.
It's not going to make a difference.
You can get you a Big Mac meal.
Right. So when we go around and do our
I appreciate the thought,
agreement,
but at the same time, I just don't.
Just honoring a request that came
Absolutely,
last fall.
absolutely.
So-
Perfect.
but yes, we'll have to have an agreement and consensus before we can move forward. Yes, sir.
Any other questions there? Okay. All right. So this is what I was talking about. These are some other things that we currently don't have, just because when you see the numbers, you're going to see why we had to put a stop at some point. But these are definitely other things that we want to consider. So should we be able to reallocate funds, or we get additional funding, or we can find some cost savings somewhere? We want to add some recruitment and incentive for some of our hard to staff areas like special education. And it could be that we use grant funding to do that for the next couple of years if we can't build it in right now. And this is where we want to expand the offerings and the spaces at the Page County Technical Center. We want to add an additional career coach because we think that would be really valuable. At this time right now, we have one person who's part-time serving essentially 3 schools, both the high schools and the tech center. And that's a relatively inexpensive add for us. It's in conjunction with Lord Fairfax, so I think this would be one that we could look at if we find some savings somewhere. We can easily add that one in. Medicaid and special education specialist position. Right now, somebody's in charge of Medicaid billing, and that's a very intensive, time-intensive process. With new regulations and things changing with Medicaid in the next year, we anticipate we're going to see more billing need to occur. And so there's a possibility that we're going to need a person just to do Medicaid billing. In that case, we'd need to have one person for the Medicaid and one person for the special ed specialist. Right now, it's a split, so she does half and half. We'd split that out and do each of those would now become full-time positions. We had talked about this earlier as well, about the potential if we want to recruit, not only do we want to recruit high-quality teachers and staff, we want to recruit high-quality school-based administrators. We need to do some salary scale adjustments for theirs. Right now, you come in on 0 and you stay on 0 no matter how many years you stay with us. Essentially, there's one salary, and then each year you might only get the raise that's the percentage raise that's included for staff. What you see in most divisions is there's a step there where you go from 0 to 1, there's a built-in increase. Even if you don't get a percentage increase for salary raise that year, you're at least getting a step increase. We've talked about this as well in terms of our workplace readiness and having more career opportunities for students, the possibility of a workplace learning coordinator position. A communication specialist, again, right now there's a 0.5 that's allocated for that. It's a split position with a school media center specialist librarian who also does some of the communications work for us. And I put this in there because if we want to grow and tell our story and get out there and be positive and project and share all these really good things that are happening, we need people to help do that. It's a time-intensive process. So that's something perhaps down the road we could consider. And the other thing we've talked about a little bit this year as well is the online substitute management system. So having a system that manages all of that for us, that would take that work off of our school secretaries who on Sunday evenings and early Monday morning are calling to try and find substitutes. This would be an online system that calls and allows teachers and substitutes to go online and check to see whether or not they want to fill a position or if a teacher needs to report that they're going to be sick through that. Any questions there? All right, in terms of our revenue sources, and you guys have seen a lot of this information, we'll expand this for you over the next couple of weeks, but the primary funding for us comes from 3 sources. It comes from the Commonwealth of Virginia, so our state funding, Page County, who is our appropriating body, and then the federal government and miscellaneous sources. And you can see the percentages there. 61% of our funding last year came from the state. 27% came from Page County, from the Board of Supervisors and the taxpayers in Page County, and then 12% came from federal government grants and other sources of income for us. So here's our proposed budget, and we've given you 2021-22. Sorry, hang on. Share again. Thank you, Doug. So, and again, Fund 1 is our operating budget of that's the basic allocations that come that we can use for things anywhere from staffing to materials and supply. So this year, you'll see that that's at $43,858,985,000. So a little bit of an increase from last year. Fund 2 is capital improvement, and you'll see the double asterisk there, and this is really critical because this is actually new funding from the state. So in the governor's budget, he proposed over $500 million for school construction needs. That money was divided out amongst school divisions. Every school division was given $1 million, but then high needs divisions like us who have higher poverty levels were given an additional amount of money. So right now we've been allocated $2.7 million from the state that can go towards any of those things that you see listed at the bottom, towards school construction, renovation, technology, modernization, school safety equipment, things like that. So that is a new thing for us. This is a good thing. Schools have been clamoring for a long time, as it used to be back in the early 2000s. There were big school construction budgets from the state. And when we hit the recession, all of that money was taken away. So it's nice to see some of that money being put back in and being allocated to schools. Did I miss anything there? Yeah. And then our other fund that you'll see is Fund 5 is our nutritional services that sort of operates in its own sphere, but is a part of our budget. So our total appropriation right now, as it's proposed based on the governor's budget, is $48.7 million. And you'll see that Fund 1, so that first line up there, if you look at FY 22 versus 23, that's just over a 6% increase from last year. So that's also good. Any questions there? In terms of local funding, we don't know this number yet. So right now, for our fiscal management and to be able to plan things out, we're assuming that there would be level funding from our Board of Supervisors. Last year, they did provide a 6.2% increase in funding. So I'm going to say, I hope that we see some kind of increase as well and not just stay at level funding. And my hope is that they'll join us in doing that so that we can hopefully provide this 7% increase to staff. So as we get information and we work with the Board of Supervisors, we'll update that number for you. And then we didn't put all these numbers because there's a lot of them and they have different functions, but we just wanted to give you a quick explanation of some of the federal money because we've talked about state, we've given you the local. So Title I is the money that we receive to improve the academic achievement of disadvantaged students. Title II is used to strengthen instructional leadership and teacher quality. Title III is for the academic achievement of those students we have who are English learners for the first time. Title IV is used for improving student achievement. Title 6B is our special education services and the funding that we get for that. And then our Perkins grant covers our career and technical education programming. And then this is all that other information we talked about on Tuesday night and we've been talking about now for 2 years based on COVID. These are the different types of federal funds that we've received to support moving through the COVID pandemic. And I think what's really important here is that people need to understand that these funds are intended to be for one-time use types of things. They're not recurring funds. And they have a finite spend date. For example, you'll see that the ESSER 3, we have to have all of that money spent by September of 2024. So the critical piece here that's important for everyone to understand is if we use them for instructional positions, which we can, we just have to be able then at the end of that grant cycle, so in 2024, if we're using ESSER 3 funds, we then have to be able to pick up the cost of that instructional position in our local budget. So we're being very careful about how and what we do in terms of bringing in other staffing positions, because we can't necessarily assure right now in 2 years' time we're going to be able to fund that position locally.
Do you know what that is currently?
Which?
The number of positions that we have on grants that do actually expire?
I don't offhand, but we can get you
That would be interesting to know.
Well, you have to be careful with Title I too, that you don't get all your money on salary and then you never get stuff to do with them.
And every grant has different, specific criteria associated with it, and you can use for this and you can't use for that and things like that. So, but we can, are you talking just about the COVID ones or do you want title as well?
I want whatever funding is temporary. I think we should know what those positions are.
I will say I will work on that, but we have really tried to avoid doing as much of that as possible because of that, knowing that it's going to expire.
Right, I get you. I
Right,
get what you're
so,
saying.
but we'll work
Right.
on getting you a list of that, but we'll
Because that's
have,
risk.
right,
Yes.
we have
That's
tried
risk
to
every year
avoid
you
that
go.
risk, yes,
Yeah.
sir. We have tried to avoid it as much as possible.
I can tell you two come to mind right now. One is the COVID liaison position that we put in this year that has been absolutely critical.
Absolutely.
We are now moving that over to the VISTA grant that we got. So we paid the beginning of the year, came out of ESSER 3, but the end of the year is going to come out of the VISTA grant. The other new position that we just put in is that partnership with Northwestern for the school-based therapist. And so those right now, I believe, we're paying stipends for
Well,
teachers.
that's not bad. I was thinking maybe we had 5 or 6 positions.
Yeah.
We have some outlined when we submitted our ESSER3 grant. We outlined some things, and I'll show them to you in a second, like some instructional coaches, some family and community liaison. But we didn't fill them this year because we knew that those would pull teachers potentially, and we were struggling with staffing anyway, so it didn't make sense to move. Now, it might be that we open up some of those. They'll know if they take that position, it's only for 2 years. Because it'll be on the job description that it's a grant-funded position.
And you can always, whatever you put in there, you can always amend it, and then they like reapprove it. So it can change.
Because one thing, I don't want to get into the weeds too much, just a point as I'm thinking about it so I don't forget it. You know, I'm concerned about speech therapy for some of the younger kids that missed all that learning time. That's something that we need to be looking at. The articles I'm reading is that some of that exists.
And good luck finding speech.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think we're pretty lucky. We have some good ones on staff. And I will have to check to verify this, don't mark me, but I believe we also use one in a virtual capacity from an outside, because we couldn't staff that position, but we get virtual services for those students. So instructional aid brings the student to meet. They do their online speech therapy with the person online, and then the aide takes them up.
And they've allowed now what's called speech language for all of these assistants.
Yeah.
Where they don't have to have the full degree yet. They just have to be working in conjunction with a
that's good.
certified
That's
one.
smart to do that.
That's accurate. We have a speech person that splits in the middle of the elementary, and we have a teacher assistant that has to split because we need someone on this end with the student.
Okay.
But it's a very valid point. So I'd say to anybody out there in college who may not know what to do, go look into speech pathology, because you will always have a job.
And our recruiters for the division, and we've got
And then, so again, this is sort of towards answering your question. We have in the future, you know, we're going to continue. We want to definitely continue this partnership with Northwestern. We just had a good meeting with them this afternoon. Their hope is that that position ultimately funds itself. So we put it in grant right now, and then over time, we're hoping it'll fund itself, and we won't need to even use local funds for it. So we have 2 years to work through that. So some of the people that we do want to potentially position staffing and from some of that grant money is for some instructional coaches, school improvement specialists, the family and community liaisons, which just help coordinate different things, reading specialists, and an additional behavior specialist just to help with those needs that we're seeing. So what we'll do is, as we complete our budget process and we see if we might have gaps there where we can add other positions, it might be that we put some of these in our local budget, or it might be that we go ahead and move forward with ESSER3 funding and fund those positions again with them knowing that they're 2-year funded, grant-funded positions. And the risk, you're right, is that come FY25, we have to make a decision about those positions and say, we can either fund them locally or we have to unfortunately now do away. And that's a hardship, because we don't want to put an instructional coach in a building, then in 2 years we pull them away. So we really have to, I think, feel confident that in 2 years we might be able to continue those. All right, we're almost there. So here's just a summary of our projected revenue, kind of giving you a sense of where that revenue is coming from. So your federal, a little over $4 million. Your state, just Fund 1, so that's that operational money, is a little over $27 million. And then again, local with that asterisk next to it is that's level funding based on FY22 allocations from the Board of Supervisors. So that puts our projected revenue at just over $42 million for this coming school year. So keep that number in mind. In terms of our increased costs that we've outlined for you tonight, the compensation increase that we shared, so that's that 7% plus the step, the realignment of the scales, and the minimum wage updates is just over $2.6 million. Your additional staff positions, so all of those ones we listed, social worker, electricity teacher, just under $600,000. That 10% health insurance increase that we talked about is around $530,000. And then those other costs that I told you, so that's the electricity teacher and the school board, is just over $6,000. So our increased costs, so if we do everything that we've talked about tonight, we're adding essentially $3.7 million to our budget. So that's the amount of money we've got to find if we want to do all of those things. Not accurate?
Yes, and then when you move to the next slide, you'll see with the state projected funding of a little over 2, the shortfall or what we would need is the 1.6.
So there's going to be a funding increase at the state to offset those.
Yes, yes, sir. So that would be only in Fund 1. Right now, it's a projected increase. And then, so that would leave the shortfall or the need at 1.6.
A property tax from that.
And I just want to, again, the asterisk there, and I forgot my double asterisk, but the second line there, that doesn't include that school construction money, because you can't use that for staffing or anything like that. That has to be allocated to very specific purposes, so we can't throw it into the general fund here. And then, so that 1.6, we got to find a way to fill that gap. So we can either reallocate, we can ask for additional funding from our local Board of Supervisors, we can look for additional savings within the current budget. So that's where we stand today as of this moment in time in terms of looking at all those priorities and what we want and how we move forward. So next steps, we're going to ask you all to provide us with any questions that you might have, and they don't necessarily have to be tonight, because I know you may want to, absorb this information and reflect on it. Tell us what other informational pieces you might need. In upcoming meetings, we'll answer those questions, we'll share additional information with you, and we'll definitely provide you with updates based on the local and state budget processes. So it'll be good to hear some information on Sunday when those budgets go into crossover. In terms of meetings and input, our public input opportunity is coming up next Thursday at our regularly scheduled school board meeting. There is a pre-budget hearing scheduled, and that meeting is at 6:30 at Luray High School. And then as far as you all are concerned, in terms of work sessions and getting down to more of the nitty-gritty of this, you have a couple of meetings there, the next one of which is Thursday, March the 10th, which is a regular board meeting and a work session. And then that next Tuesday, you have another work session. And then that March 24th, we hope to be able to put forward to you a budget for approval. And that, again, is contingent on a lot of factors, not only just us, but the state and where they move with things and the timing of that, and then the Board of Supervisors and where they move with things.
If we get real nitty gritty and it's like a restructuring questions where you can definitely tie somebody to it, that's probably something we should do in closed session.
And then I just ask everybody, not only you all, I know you're there, but I just ask everybody in the community, our teachers, everybody, we all are just continuing to remember our why every day. Whether it's talking about budget or the work that we do, just remembering that this is all about kids. And that is everything I have for you all tonight, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have tonight or take them down and get back to you, or if you all just want to discuss and send me questions later, that's fine as well.
I'd like to look at it. And then I see some things, but I want to look at it and then I'll send you some.
Okay, not a problem.
One thing earlier, and I don't know exactly what section it was, but about getting recognition for things that are going into the school, going on in the schools and whatever. I just want to comment. I know Shenandoah is doing it. I know Stanley has done it that I've seen. But that's a great way to recognize a teacher for something special that they're doing in the classroom, or a student, or that the students are doing. I've seen the most this year than I ever have. And it's amazing how much people pay attention to that. And
Some of them experiments are cool stuff.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff you want to see out there.
And I know one teacher said, it just made my day that it was on there. So it's, and I thought about the lady custodian at Stanley last evening.
Darlene.
That's the kind of recognition, a special day, and put them on there, and for her to say, I love coming to work. I've been here 18 years. hello, that's the recognition is major. And just that little shot there makes all the difference in the world. So I just commend all of them that are doing that. And the more we can do in that respect, I think it's great.
Yeah, Miss Runyon is doing a great job. In fact, the thing that's out now with Tell Me Something Good has just blown up. Where it's, you put in a Google form, you can say, like, you could say something good about Mrs. Good. She's getting them to send her a picture, and then she's pushing it out. And she has over 100 of them that are getting ready to be pushed out over the next day or so.
Well, the library at Stanley, the last time I was in there, there were used TVs and everything else just pushed in there, and I'm like, and I did send Elizabeth an email, and I mean, just some of the displays had the neatest little bird nest, it was real. All throughout letters, all the books are in alphabetical order. Here's the A section, the B. What a great thing for the kids. They don't use a Dewey Decimal System, of course. But I mean, little things like that, it stands out.
It takes somebody to be able to have the time to do that and to be able to, we're having a communications plan that we're developing, and part of the vision of that is having people to be able to push those things out. So that our image is a positive one out there.
I would like for somebody who, computer oriented, talk with Jeff Berner at Stonewall High School. I'm sorry, Mountain View, sorry. He has started a communication program. The kids are doing all the work. They went back and did a history on basketball, and they lined it all up. And it's just amazing. They're working with TV Channel 3. They're working with the radio stations. But he would be a good resource that somebody really interested could go and shadow. But the kids are doing the work.
I was thinking the same thing. You got highly skilled students that can help do some of this, and that helps their community service as well.
Plus, they're learning, hey, I like this. So that's, something that they might really seriously concern. And even with the custodial, I'm thinking, in the summer, there might be somebody that, would want a part-time job if we could hire them. I mean, I don't know if you can or not. But again, it might be something, this is a good situation. And not for everybody, but try it out. And I realize it takes people in order to do that. But like I said, the way Jeff has this thing worked up, the kids are doing all the work and he's overseeing it. So just an idea.
I guess with the ADM that we're going down to the 2986, how is that shown in here, that loss?
Yes, sir. So the whole budget is built on that number.
Okay.
So the 2986,
Okay.
that's the number that the state revenue is based on. All of our money, other than the local match amount that we would potentially get, is all based on that number. Yes, sir.
Okay. And the law, that number, what is that dollar value difference between 3123 and 2986?
I would have to calculate that. So the state
I'd be
gives us
curious.
a budget template, and I can fluctuate that. And
I would be
get you the
curious to see what
difference.
that is, because that's part of the story you got to tell the supervisors, right? We're going down ADM for our matches.
And if we end up with more kids, we'll get more money.
Right.
Right.
So the $10,799 cost per child, that was one of the first slides. And of that number, I think it's worthwhile looking at the percentage of what that looks like from a budget standpoint. Like I said, 25%, if it's 10% transportation, that kind of number. I think that kind of, it would be good detail for me to see. And some of the supervisors would understand that very well. I think it helps when you divide that stuff up.
It's pretty much over.
Do we have a consensus on what the kindergarten numbers look like for next year? Do they still do
That's the next
We
one.
just started.
Okay. I didn't know when you did that. Okay. What is it that they do? They go out in the community and take, I can't think of the word.
The census?
Yes, okay. My husband used to do that and I couldn't remember what it was.
So another point I got, when it comes to the tech center, because I look at just the one electricity class, that's a very conservative thing from what we've seen. I feel. We had good engagement with the board supervisors that were there this past week. And then we have engagement from the foundation. But how does all that come together? You know, we understand the process with the board of supervisors, but the foundation, I mean, is it something that the foundation, we're asking for donations, we're asking for one-time big donations to expand the programming, and then you handle the salary part of it possibly? Or is there a mixed bag? Because you don't know what to ask, right? If you're coming to me as a business owner, what do you need? I don't know what we need. We kind of like to double up what we're doing at the base camp, but we really don't know. I think that's a story that somewhat needs to be developed, because I like for you to be able to tell the foundation, hey, if we had $100,000 of donations, we could do this, this, and this.
Leanne would be the main lead on that.
I mean, I can tell you right now, if we have 100,000 in donations, the first thing we want and need to do is to complete that other welding space in the back. That other room needs to be completed. The next thing would be to decide, and this is where Leanne is critical and is doing the thinking on it, is what course would you offer next?
Right.
And then what's the facility that's needed? Because they're running out of space there, so we know it's going to be a pretty large investment to expand. And then what kind of equipment is needed for that?
Yeah. So that's a lot of groundwork that it'd be nice to know that this year. I don't know if that's possible.
Well, I was talking to Dr. Fox after the meeting the other evening. When it's feasible for any of the board of supervisors to just go one day and walk through the building and see what's there and look in on some of the classes, encourage them to do that. I know they all can't do it all the time, but that gives you a better understanding and, knowing you need space for why. Well, when you get to the existing room and see what you don't have, what you could have, that opens up the
Well, I think
picture.
that's something that is probably should be part of the process, along with the businesses to come in as well, right?
Right, exactly.
Because you want to visually, you see it, you know what needs to,
Exactly.
you can see it better. But I think the supervisors that were there the other night understood what we were saying.
I told
Maybe I'm
Dr.
wrong.
Fox, of all the joint, and there haven't been very many over the years, sessions, this was the first time that I didn't hear negativity coming out of certain board of supervisors about, well, you don't do this, or, you should use the money. It's the first positive meeting I've been to.
No, some weren't there.
Yeah.
Some weren't there.
Well, and that's true, too, weren't there. And the one I it probably would have had some negativity. But that being said, I told her, is this thing on?
Yeah.
Well, I thought they did a good job. I mean, I really did think it was positive in the sense that they asked good questions. I was amazed of the technical interest there.
Absolutely.
And I mean, they were taking it in, but it was the first time in a long time that there hadn't been any negativity. And I thought that was a plus in itself.
We got a great opportunity. I think we have a great opportunity to grow that tech center, but also it's a great opportunity to have everybody working together as a team. But we know what we put our kids through. I think we're seeing the effects of it. Everybody knows we need to step up and make some changes and things happen. I think it's a great opportunity for us right now. Get some of these things going across the goal line.
Well, again, the more we put out there, information-wise, it'll grow. But we really got to make a point to get people interested. And I know Leanne's talking about getting parents to come in at a much earlier age, because they don't know a lot of times, what's there or how it works. And wait until middle school, in a lot of ways, it's too late. So I think it's all possible. I really do. Takes time and effort, but it'll be worth it.
I just did have one question. I think it may have been at that meeting, Mr. Benson mentioned school enrolled classes that we currently don't have teachers for. Is that built into these numbers that you presented? Are
So,
those positions still in
yes,
there?
they are still in the budget. We did not, remove any positions from the budget.
Okay, because, while I think it is extremely important to focus on the technical center, I think we also have to continue to focus on those kids that are, looking to possibly go into college, whether it be a 2-year or 4-year, because that does save a lot of money. So we need to be able to offer, as many advanced classes as we can too.
Or they were not touched, they were left there.
And then I know the governor school seats that we had, I know, Ms. Benson, you remember we cut some of those.
Two are back.
Two are back.
Yep. And we're
Marta Milam was there last night, too, so, it's good to talk to her and know that's back. What's that next class look like? Do we need 2 more?
Well, we're pushing hard to try and get more because we've got kids that want to go.
Okay, 5 and 5.
5 juniors, 5 seniors.
Okay,
We like to get 2 more, like Dr. Fox said.
okay, all
I've
right.
already turned in my 32 names, so I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, it's contingent on them and the spacing they have, so we are just ecstatic and grateful to get the 2 this year. And we'll keep pushing to get 2 more.
But with the dual enroll thing, that's not so much a teacher, that they have the certification to offer to have the
To
dual
have
enroll.
Yeah, and that's the challenge sometimes is finding teachers with the certification. So where we can be creative is finding funds to help teachers get the certification so that we can
Yes.
offer more dual enrollment courses.
Oh, that was one thing. One of your, we'd like to have, but we can't yet, maybe,
Incentive.
recruitment incentives for target staff areas. So what are we using for next year? What do you think we're going to use Title II funds for?
I don't know. Let me get back to you
Because
on that.
that could fall under that, because I know a lot of people used to use it for the class size thing,
Yeah,
but
3rd grade reduction.
that's out the window when you don't have enough teachers anyway.
We can look at that. Because there also may be some flexibility and opportunity there in the Title IV money that we have as well.
And the other thing with the supervisor, I think one of the things I took away they were interested in was how many, Dr. Jones, I think you mentioned it, trying to hire our former students coming, 'cause I'm a big proponent of that, right? And how many do we have? I think that's some things that we should look at, because there might be some great growth opportunity, because we got kids graduating every year, right, after the colleges, so. I think they were very interested. I appreciate the question.
So as we move forward, you remember last year when you all had questions, I would, put them in a format, the question and the answer. So we'll bring these back for you all at our work session, as well as, we're working on the analysis of our classified scales versus those in the region. We've already done all of these adjustments and things that we've talked about, but we want to be able to compare and so that we have an analysis and comparison to show you all as well. So we will have these things for you all. Yeah.
And I guess, so I know you're working hard at it. We did it all last year as well. So does she have opportunities to go to other school divisions and see what they present and how they do it as well?
Maybe. A lot of them are online. We don't even have to go
Okay,
anymore.
all right,
We
so
can
you
just go online and,
Perfect.
yeah, I mean, some of your wording in here tonight, I'm not ashamed to say I stole from other superintendents. But yeah, and we're keeping an eye. I mean, you have a sheet in there that shows you, the percent, compensation increases from around the region. And they're doing the same thing. They'll look at, because there's other superintendents that are also looking at their classified scales. So we may come back to you and say we need to make some additional adjustments to get them more competitive over and above. You know, it may be that $12, getting to the $12 minimum wage is not enough, and we might have to go to $12.50. Or go ahead and jump and bite the bullet and go to 2024 and go to $13 dollars. So I think, you know, that's going to be part of this process where we, you know, see what our funding comes back as, and if we get extra funding, where do we want to put that, and how are we stacking up regionally with compensation? Because we've got to get ahead of it. You know, we can level fund with everybody and do 5% and be fine, but we're not going to gain anything with that. So we've got to get ahead. And at some point, we've got to decide, we're going to have to get this chunk of money at some point in the next couple of years. Do we do it now, or do we keep kicking that can down the street?
I think you have to realize too, like, yeah, here's in the city in Rockingham, that's good, but our cost of living is a little lower. And a lot of things don't even sacrifice the time to pass the drive that far.
And you have to have revenue coming in into the county, and that's, you know, if we can attract more businesses, but the stronger the school system, the better chance you have, especially if there are families moving to the area because of the job. You know, that's definitely a gold star there.
Nevertheless, when you raise salaries, that was my point of contention last year. We raise salaries for the teachers. That money, if they live in the county, it's coming back in some way, right?
Yeah.
So that's one way. I look at it as a positive win-win.
And I've always felt like, and I don't know the exact number, but a good many of our teachers, if not the majority, live in the county. That says something about, you know, they like living here, they're enjoying what they're doing. I mean, I wouldn't want to live anyplace else. And it's, there's a lot of reasons. But for those who remain here, I think that's a big plus. You know, and we're not always going to attract outside people, but we do. But the more we can get to stay and come on board, but as you know, teaching positions are scarce across the country. And I don't know how you change getting them to go. I mean, I've got some ideas on how to get them in, but colleges have to help with that as well. But I'll take one stoplight any day. Well, I think this has been really good. The budget's one of the hardest things for me to understand, but
And if I may, can I thank Ms. Seacrest
I
for this time?
understand that, absolutely.
Their work has just been incredible, because the amount of work that goes into it, I mean, we're just hitting the tipping point here. The real work is still to come, but I want to thank her personally for her work, and Mr. Benson and Ms. Dr. Johnson for their help, because they're ultimately, you know, we're going to have some big staffing conversations coming up soon, and they're instrumental to those as well. So the work goes to everybody.
Their knowledge
Yeah.
from over the years,
Yep.
big plus.
I'm grateful to have such a strong team to help.
I wish I could do like a side-by-side of last year. Like there's like sincere thank yous and like credit, and
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
I make second, Mr. Painter.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to adjourn.
Yep, Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Mrs. Silverstein.
Yes.
Gordon.
Yes. We're adjourned.